The Electoral Commission of South Africa is pushing for the general elections to be as close to May as possible, but that can be tricky as there are still delays in the formation of electoral reform consultation panels, as well as making the necessary amendments in accordance with the Electoral Amendment Act. Now, for more on this, I'm joined by Michael Atkins, an independent IT consultant and elections specialist. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. With the deadline of the 19th of October missed and the names not being submitted to the Portfolio Committee, help us make sense of what this all means as we consider that elections are around the corner.
Good afternoon. Fortunately, the Electoral Reform Panel is not going to affect the actual election date. That is to do research and consult the public on electoral systems that would be used in the following election. So no great harm arises with this delay. It's just a simple fact that the panel has not been convened, even though the Electoral Amendment Act specified that that should have happened. As you mentioned, the other legislation that needs to be passed ahead of the elections to allow independent candidates to be accommodated in various other laws around elections, that bill has not been introduced to Parliament yet, and that could be interesting in terms of the timing of the elections.
With a lot of criticism that's come with this is the DA saying that Minister Motsoaledi is intentionally delaying the electoral reform every step of the way. If that is indeed a deliberate move, what motive would be behind it?
Look, I generally prefer not to speculate on motives. It is true that the Electoral Amendment Act itself took a long time to be processed. There is no obvious motive to delay this process. The panel must report a year after next year's elections to Parliament so that a new system can be put in place potentially before the 2029 election. But of concern is the fact that we don't yet have a bill before Parliament. The Party Funding Act, for example, needs to be amended to incorporate independent candidates. And the Electoral Commission Act needs to be amended to allow for what is currently known as the Party Liaison Committee. In the run-up and the course of the elections, the IEC obviously is in consultation with parties every step of the way. And this obviously must now include independent candidates. And then there is the broadcast legislation, which regulates political parties and airtime, and that has to somehow incorporate independent candidates. So this bill, which would be known as the Electoral Matters Amendment Bill, has been to the State Law Advisor. The Minister has told the Portfolio Committee for Home Affairs that it will go to Cabinet next month for approval, but there are no firm dates, and it will take a few months for those amendments to be passed.
So the failure by Minister Motsoaledi to establish the Electoral Reform Consultation Panel in the time frame prescribed by the law, what impact will that have on its effectiveness?
Well, the panel has the remit to conduct research in the period leading up to next year's election, and after the election to hold public consultations and then prepare a comprehensive report with one or more recommended electoral systems, along with various reforms that might be considered. So there is no immediate impact to the delay, except that it's not great that the minister has not fulfilled the terms of a law that he put through Parliament less than a year ago. So, there is just that fact of, are our electoral laws being followed scrupulously? And it's just an unfortunate delay. Hopefully it will be done soon. But the chair of the IEC was interviewed on your channel earlier this week.
Yes.
And he stated at the time that the consultation between the minister and the commission had not yet concluded. The names for that panel must then be submitted to Parliament for discussion and approval before the minister finally appoints the panel. So presumably this will happen before the end of the current parliamentary term, early December.
Yeah, that interview was with my colleague Tembegile Mkhototo. Must the Electoral Matters Amendment Act be passed before the election timetable can commence?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
My reasoning is that it would be difficult to go into that election timetable with independent candidates not being regulated in terms of the donations that they receive in that period. There would be no, if it is proclaimed and they have that timetable, there would be no regulation on airtime for independent candidates, and there would be no law governing the IEC's consultations with parties and independent candidates explicitly. So that is a question for constitutional people to consider, but it's a question that we probably need an answer to quite soon.
Yeah.
Because it is unlikely that we would see that act enforced and signed before April of next year, which could then have an impact on the dates that are available for the election to be proclaimed.
So what would you say are the big questions here that still need some urgent answers?
Well, the question is, will Cabinet consider this Electoral Matters Amendment Bill during November? Will they be able to approve it before the end of the current parliamentary term? So that is a question. There are some details of that legislation. Nobody has seen that bill yet. There are some details concerning the regulation on funding and donations to independent candidates that will be important. A lot of the amendments are technical, but the difficult question of the broadcast regulations for independent candidates has yet to be considered, and that might cause some interest.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much for fleshing that one out for us. Some analysis there coming out from Michael Atkins, independent IT consultant and election result analyst.